Snow can hide a lot, but it can't hide what was following them up in the mountains that night. Story 1. The old Grandview Lodge clung to the side of Blackwood Mountain like a determined, weather-beaten barnacle. I'd booked it for a solitary week in late autumn, before the real crowds, hoping for some quiet to finish my novel. The proprietor, a gruff man named Silas, had given me a look that bordered on pity as he handed over the heavy iron key. "Forecast's turning, son," he'd rumbled. "Can get mighty lonesome up here when the storm blows in." He wasn't wrong. The first 2 days were idyllic, crisp air and the scent of pine. But on the third evening, the sky turned a bruised purple. The wind, initially a whisper, morphed into a banshee's shriek. By midnight, what started as a gentle fall became a full-blown whiteout. Snow hammered against the single-pane windows, a relentless, icy drumbeat. The lodge groaned, a living thing fighting for breath under the onslaught. Power flickered once, then twice, before settling into a dim, uneasy glow. My phone had lost all signal hours ago. I was alone, truly alone. It was sometime after 2 a.m. when the sounds started. Beyond the howl of the wind and the constant thump-thump of accumulating snow against the roof, there was something else. A faint, irregular scratch. Scratch. Coming from somewhere in the walls beside my bedroom. I tried to convince myself it was just a branch, or mice. This was an old lodge, after all. But the rhythm was too deliberate, too insistent. I pulled the blanket tighter, the old wool scratching against my chin, and tried to focus on the storm outside. The scratching stopped, only to be replaced by a new sound. A faint, almost melodic ping from downstairs, like something metal had gently tapped glass. I sat bolt upright, heart thudding. It couldn't be the wind. The windows were sealed tight, and that sound was too distinct, too isolated. I slipped out of bed, the floorboards cold beneath my bare feet, and crept to the door. The hallway was a tunnel of oppressive shadows, illuminated only by the faint bleed of my bedside lamp. My breath plumed in the frigid air. The lodge felt colder than it should, an unnatural chill seeping from the very walls. I listened, straining. The wind howled, rattling the entire structure. But beneath it, I heard it again. A soft, dragging sound from the main common room downstairs, like something heavy being pulled across the polished wooden floor. I swallowed, the sound loud in my own ears. Every rational fiber in me screamed to stay put, to just wait it out till morning. But a morbid curiosity, a horrifying need to know, pulled me forward. I descended the grand, creaking staircase, each step a thunderclap in the oppressive silence that seemed to have swallowed the storm's fury. At the bottom landing, the common room lay before me, bathed in the inadequate glow of the few remaining electric fixtures struggling to stay alive. The large stone fireplace was a black maw, and there, in the center of the room, lay a heavy, antique armchair. It had been neatly tucked against the wall earlier that evening. Now, it was turned, facing the entryway, its back to me, and on its worn velvet armrest was a single, silver pocket watch, slowly swinging back and forth from a chain, creating the faint ping I'd heard. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to even breathe. The pocket watch picked up speed, swinging faster, a small, rhythmic pendulum against the backdrop of the raging storm outside. And from the empty armchair, a whisper, colder than the blizzard itself, drifted to my ears. "You're not alone." The lodge groaned, a sound that no longer felt like wood settling, but something else entirely. Something hungry. I turned and fled back up the stairs, the screams catching in my throat, not daring to look back, knowing that whatever moved that chair, whatever whispered in the cold, was still there, and the storm outside meant I had nowhere to go. Story 2. Another week passed, and the forecast had been clear when I booked the Timberline Lodge. It was supposed to be a peaceful solo retreat, just me, the mountains, and bottomless powder. The lodge itself was an old, sprawling timber structure, nestled deep in a valley, miles from the nearest town. Perfect, I thought. The first few days were idyllic. the snow silent and deep. But then, the sky decided to turn a bruised purple, and the winds began to pick up, whistling a low, mournful tune through the pines. By evening, the squall had morphed into a full-blown blizzard. Snow fell thick and fast, plastering itself against the frost-rimmed panes until the windows were just white blurred canvases. The only other occupant, an elderly caretaker named Silas, had left a note saying he was hunkering down in his cabin down the road, advising me to do the same and that he'd be back when the storm broke. I was truly alone. The power flickered, then died, plunging the vast, cavernous main hall into near total darkness, save for the dying embers in the stone fireplace and the beam of my headlamp. The generator sputtered to life, a low rumble beneath the floorboards, a temporary comfort against the gnawing wind outside that now screamed like a banshee. That's when the sounds started. At first, it was just the building creaking and groaning under the onslaught, the ancient timbers settling. But then, there was a distinct thump. Not outside, not wind-related. It came from upstairs, directly above the great hall. I paused, headlamp beam bouncing off the dusty deer heads mounted on the walls. Silence followed, save for the blizzard. A few minutes later, another thump, closer this time, accompanied by a faint scraping, like something being dragged across bare floorboards. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tried to rationalize it. Animals? But the lodge was sealed tight, and the sounds weren't small, skittering noises. They were heavy, deliberate. I clutched a heavy cast-iron poker from beside the fireplace, my only weapon. The generator chose that moment to sputter again, coughing violently before fading into silence. Complete darkness. The only sound was my ragged breath and the unrelenting howl of the storm. Then, a whisper. So faint, I almost convinced myself it was the wind. But it was too close, too human. From the dark stairwell leading upstairs. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice cracking. No answer, just the whisper again, followed by a soft, rhythmic thud, thud, thud descending the stairs. I swung my headlamp beam wildly, catching a fleeting glimpse. A shadow. Tall, gaunt, impossibly quick, disappearing before I could fully register it. But I saw enough. It was moving on all fours, heading towards me. Pure, primal terror seized me. I didn't think. I just acted. Dropping the poker, I scrambled towards the heavy oak front door, fumbling with the deadbolt, my fingers numb with cold and fear. The thudding was faster now, right behind me. A guttural growl vibrated through the floorboards. I burst outside into the maelstrom, instantly swallowed by knee-deep snow and blinding wind, my headlamp beam useless. I ran, lungs burning, not knowing where I was going, just away from that lodge, from whatever was lurking inside. I don't remember much after that, just a blur of white and cold, until I collapsed, somehow, into Silas's cabin. He found me half frozen, incoherent. I've been back to the mountains since, but never to another isolated lodge. And every time the wind howls, I still hear that whisper, and the dragging footsteps coming down the stairs, forever chasing me from the dark. Story 3. The old Tamarack Lodge stood like a forgotten tooth in the jaw of the Rockies. I'd booked it for a solo retreat, a chance to clear my head before the real crush of winter tourists. The first day was fine. Crisp air, fresh powder, the kind of quiet that resets your soul. But as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, the sky turned the bruised purple of an old wound, and the forecast blizzard descended with a vengeance. By midnight, the world outside was a swirling, opaque wall of white. The gnawing wind howled like a banshee, rattling the ancient window panes in their frames. The lodge, a sprawling timber structure, creaked and groaned around me, every sound magnified by the sheer isolation. I was the only guest, the caretaker having scurried off down the mountain before the roads became impassable. Just me, the vast wilderness, and whatever else chose to weather the storm. It started subtly, a rhythmic scratching, faint at first, then growing more insistent, somewhere above my room on the second floor. I told myself it was branches, skeletal trees scraping against the roof, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too purposeful. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the embers in the stone fireplace, watching the shadows dance like spectral figures. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, slow, dragging. They originated from the long, dark hallway outside my door. Thump, drag, thump, drag. My heart hammered against my ribs. It couldn't be the wind. This was distinct. I froze, hand instinctively reaching for the heavy brass poker by the hearth. The sounds paused directly outside my door, a silence so profound it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. I held my breath, listening, straining my ears over the blizzard's rising shriek. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the thick wood of the door, a sound that wasn't human, wasn't animal, but something primordial and utterly wrong. My blood ran cold. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself against the far wall, my eyes wide with terror fixed on the door. The handle began to turn, slowly, silently. I watched, paralyzed, as it twisted, inch by agonizing inch, until the latch clicked open. A sliver of blackness appeared in the opening. The blizzard's roar seemed to amplify, carrying with it a chilling, almost musical hum from beyond the frame. No light spilled in, only the darker void of what lay outside. I could feel a frigid current seeping into the room, carrying with it the smell of ice and something else, something foul and ancient. Then, just as a dark shape began to coalesce in the doorway, the lodge's emergency generator, which had sputtered intermittently all night, gave a final wheezing gasp and died. The room plunged into absolute darkness. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound ripped from my throat. I heard a faint, wet chuckle that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere. I don't remember much after that, just the frantic fumbling for my phone, the useless, no-signal message, and the terrifying knowledge that I was trapped, alone, with something unspeakable in the heart of that blizzard. The sun eventually broke through the next morning, painting the pristine snow in deceptive hues of gold. But the silence inside the lodge felt heavier, colder, and forever tainted by the sounds of the night. I fled, leaving everything behind, and I haven't set foot in a ski lodge since. There are some things the snow buries but can never erase.